Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Geek Rants with Ike. So today we're going to be talking about another thing that frustrates me. There are a lot of things that frustrate me. But today we're going to talk about a couple of different things, but specifically they're in relation to remakes. Remakes sometimes are great. Sometimes remakes are wonderful. Sometimes remakes and reboots are so great and wonderful that you just cannot get enough of them. But sometimes you watch these remakes and these reboots and they just drive you absolutely wild. So today we're going to talk about why I hate remakes or reboots. So first and foremost, to start this off, the reason we have so many remakes and reboots is because people want them, all right? I can't tell you how many times I'll go online somewhere, or I'll go on Facebook or Twitter, and people are asking for remakes and reboots of movies and television shows from 10, 15, 20 years ago, which is all fine and dandy in theory. You know, go ahead and remake this movie, go ahead and remake this, go ahead and remake that, you know, which in theory could or could not be good things. This content could potentially be good, or it could potentially be bad. So in addition to that, there are also periods where sequels turn into sort of remakes or reboots in a way as well. But we're going to save sequels for another day because I also have very strong opinions on sequels. But specifically, we're going to talk about remakes and reboots today. That being said, I do have a couple things that I want to give examples of in regards to remakes and reboots. But I want to be clear that what I define as remakes and reboots are either A, films that completely restart a franchise, and there are good ones, or reboots being films that essentially restart a franchise by extending on the lore of an initial film. But that being said, that's what we're going to talk about today. So just so everybody's on the same page. So the first one we're going to talk about, and this one is honestly indicative of a larger issue, is the Karate Kid remake. Okay. So I'm going to compare some things for you. The very first Karate Kid was Noriyuki Pat Morita and Ralph Macchio being the titular characters. Then, of course, that was obviously a very long time ago. And then in the 2000s, they made a remake, which was Jaden Smith and Jackie Chan. Now, this is in no way, shape, or form a diss at Jackie Chan, because I think Jackie Chan, quite frankly, is probably one of the most wonderful human beings that have ever existed. And I also think that Jackie Chan is probably one of the very few certifiable badasses that I've ever seen in my entire life. That being said, the remake of The Karate Kid almost seemed like a slap in the face. They didn't really bring anybody back to make cameos. Basically, it was a completely new story, and it was what it was. It was a reboot. They were trying to do a cash grab, and that's really what the 2000s were about, is I feel like between 2000 and 2010, there were hundreds probably of remakes and reboots that, in my opinion, in a way, just really missed the mark. And even into the 2010s, they kept doing it. And I chose this one as a specific example because in a more recent time, they've actually made a continuation, which in a way rebooted the franchise yet again, Cobra Kai. And Cobra Kai is quite incredible. It is more than acceptable, and it is so much better than what they had envisioned for the Karate Kid remake that it is almost laughable that that was a thing that they had done. And a lot of people, for instance, I had spoken to some people who have seen both of them, and there are some people who do prefer the newer version because, unfortunately, there are those who are wrong. Yeah, I said it. You're wrong. If you like, somebody's honking at me. See, they didn't like my opinion, but guess what? I don't give a rat's ass if you like it. That's how it is. The remake of The Karate Kid was so off bar. It was so off pace, in my opinion, that it just really didn't make a sense. Now, of course, there are other films, of course, that fall into the same methodology and the same issues that I'm not going to go into too much detail, but a few that I do want to mention because these are things that I love that got remade and whatnot. Total Recall, Arnold Schwarzenegger's original Total Recall. I started the new one and I just couldn't even watch it because it just so vehemently missed the point of the original Total Recall, and it just, I don't know, didn't really mesh well with me. And there are, of course, other remakes that, did well. One specifically that I quite enjoyed was the Carrie remake. I know a lot of people didn't like this, but in 2013, there was a remake of the Carrie film. Obviously, the original film was the Sissy Spacek film in the, I believe, 1970s, early 80s. And then the remake had Chloe Grace Moretz. So in my opinion, This was an interesting remake. It followed a similar formula to the original film. However, it was different. It had a very different feeling to it. And it was okay because it didn't try to tread so much new ground that it just didn't make sense. That being said, there are plenty of other ones that I can go on about how they're horrible and how they're awful and this, that, and the other. But I'm going to not do that, because if I keep naming films and TV shows that I thought were stupid because they got remade, like, I don't know, Red Dawn, or when they try to remake the Psycho movies, or hell, they tried to remake, what was it, the Bionic Woman TV show. Irregardless, I'm not going to sit here and continue to bash on all these things, because I've given you a couple examples of where I'm coming from in regards to my hate for remakes and everything else. And some of these films, they just miss the mark, and some of these TV shows, they're just treading on such sacred ground that it just does not make any sense. But that being said, I'm going to give my final thoughts and an overall arching view on just general remakes. So my final thoughts on remakes. Remakes can be great. Remakes can be absolute shit. But unfortunately, most of the time, remakes, that little if and or but, it always points towards them being absolute shit. Because in my opinion, when you try and take something and you try and amalgamate it into something different, when you try and commit some horrifying version of alchemy to create something that's going to make you money, you always are going to mess it up. And obviously, and this is going to be an anime reference, but one of the number one rules of alchemy is that there needs to be an equal exchange, right? So instead of taking what they need and transforming it into something that's great and that makes sense, they instead just maul and mangle this information, and then they just spit out what I would consider as just garbage. 99% of the time, it's just garbage. Now, again, I'm not going to pretend like I can't enjoy remakes. To some extent, you can suspend reality, and you can suspend your own personal beliefs long enough to enjoy a shitty remake or a shitty reboot of a TV show. But irregardless, it still comes down to they're not using new material, they're using old material. And honestly, I would much rather see a frame-by-frame remake of something that they made 100 years ago than see somebody try and give them their interpretation of something, and then it's be a very shitty interpretation. And that's oftentimes what happens. So I won't continue to go on, but in my opinion, I'm going to rate remakes and reboots overall 2 out of 5. 2 out of 5 because 99% of the time, it's no new material, no new information. It's just the same old thing getting chewed up and spit out with no real up ways, sideways, down, blah 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 blah. So that being said, not gonna continue on that route, but just keep in mind that I will probably do this again in the future potentially. There are some promising remakes and reboots coming out soon, actually, in the next year or two. So I may revisit this topic. Maybe my opinion will be changed with some in the future. But until then, everybody out there, stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy, and keep on growing.